Duterte, the ICC, the COVID-19 pandemic, Trese, and the passing of former President Noynoy Aquino. Pag-uusapan natin yan at iba pa dito sa June 2021 wrap-up ng podcast, Conversations on Philippine History, Politics, and Society. Hello everyone! So natapos na naman ang isang buwan ng 2021. We are here for our monthly wrap-up. My name is Vec Alporha.
Marami talaga mga balitang gumulat sa atin and we're just halfway through the year. So let's talk about it in this episode. Hi, this is Lican Delaria.
All right, I am Aaron Malyari and today we invited a very special guest, a friend, a lawyer and lecturer in Ateneo de Manila University Department of Political Science and the UP College of Law. Let's welcome Attorney Ross Tugade. Hi, Ross.
Hello everyone, magandang araw at salamat sa pag-imbita this edition of your wrap-up for your podcast. For June, medyo aligaga tayo sapagkat dumating na nga yung pinakahihintay ng marami within the legal community here in the Philippines, which is the request of the prosecutor of the International Criminal Court to initiate a preliminary investigation in the situation in the Philippines. So matagal na nating inaabangan yan since nag-file ng first communication ang ilang mga grupo noong mga nakaraang taon. So excited tayo at the same time very anxious sa kung ano pang maaaring mangyari.
Ross, since nandito ka na, gusto ko lang tanungin or pwede bang i-explain mo sa amin at sa ating mga listeners kung ano ba yung significance, gaano ba kahalaga itong recent na development with the ICC?
Yung korte, yung ICC, it's an international criminal tribunal that is very unique. Okay? Hindi siya katulad ng mga korte sa Pilipinas na alam natin yung proseso sa pagsampa ng complaint and then merong trial na magaganap and then diretso sa desisyon ng korte. So, mas maraming additional steps sa ICC. So, uumpisahan ko siya sa nangyari noong 2017. So, balik tayo a few years back. 2017, unang nagkaroon ng communication sa International Criminal Court, Office of the Prosecutor, ang ilang mga grupo ng lawyers at ibang grupo ng mga kaanak na mga biktima. So, nagpadala sila ng kanilang mga communication na tinatawag. Doon nilalaman yung sitwasyon sa Pilipinas. So, it's a description of the situation in the Philippines. It's not technically a formal complaint because the ICC has several ways para ma-trigger yung kanyang jurisdiction or para ma-trigger yung pagte-take niyang ng notice, kumbaga, sa isang sitwasyon, sa isang bansa. So, isa doon yung pagre-receive ng mga communications from concerned parties. So, ganun ang nangyari sa Pilipinas. So, nag-umpisa yan sa isang communication, I think, filed by the late lawyer Jude Sabio na pumanaw nitong taon lang. So, siya yung isa sa mga naunang nag-file ng communication before the ICC. And then, sumunod doon ang ilang mga grupo. Grupo, I think, ni Senator Trillanes, nagsampa din ng communication. And then, other families of victims gave their communications as well to the prosecutor. So what the prosecutor did after it received the communications, it conducted what we call a preliminary examination into the situation in the Philippines. So ang preliminary examination, that happens within the office of the prosecutor muna. So hindi pa involved yung pre-trial chamber, trial chamber ng ICC. So, hindi pa involved yung judges at this point. So, si OTP, back then, si Fatou Bensouda, who we know has already stepped down, and ngayon si Karim Khan na ang bagong prosecutor. So at that time, it was still Fatou Bensouda who initiated the preliminary examination into the situation in the Philippines. So on the basis of the communications that they received from concerned parties from the Philippines, they analyze the situation if there's something in the acts described, in the cases described in those documents that would warrant the attention of the International Criminal Court. So the ICC is an international criminal tribunal that's treaty-based. Okay, based siya sa isang tratado which we call the Rome Statute. So the Philippines became a party to the Rome Statute in 2011 during President
Kailan lang pala, no?
Noynoy Aquino's time. So relatively siguro before we withdrew from the statute, medyo matagal tayong naging party dyan. Considering that the Rome Statute entered into force in 2006. 4 na classifications of crimes lang ang nasa jurisdiction ng Rome Statute. First, the crime of crimes, which we call in international criminal law, genocide. Okay. Genocide, in its technical meaning, is the elimination of a permanent group of people. So on the basis of race, on the basis of nationality, and other permanent classifications. Ethnicity, ayan. So that's genocide. Pangalawa, war crimes. Okay? War crimes are atrocities committed during armed conflict. Mapa international armed conflict, meaning country A versus country B, or non-international armed conflict, meaning the government of a state versus a non-state armed group. So, any atrocities committed, for example, killing of civilians, intentionally targeting civilians, that's a war crime. So, that's an example of a war crime. Pangatlo is what we call yung kasalukuyang pinag-uusapan ngayon in the context of the war on drugs, which is crimes against humanity. Anong crimes against humanity? Crimes against humanity is a widespread or systematic attack against a civilian population. So, it happens even outside the context of an armed conflict. So, even during peacetime, sabihin natin walang gerang nangyayari, pero merong widespread and systematic attack against a civilian population. That is a crime against humanity. And crimes against humanity can occur in many forms, through murder, through torture, sexual slavery, or gender-based violence, etc. So, nasa Rome Statute lahat yan. And yung pang-apat is the crime of aggression. So, the aggression of one state versus another state in its territory. It's among the 4 crimes against aggression is the more recent one. It's a more recent addition. Actually, may pang-5 pa na sinasuggest pa lang na i-add, which is ecocide. Which is the destruction of the environment. So environmental crimes. It's quite interesting if you look at that. So that's the subject matter jurisdiction of the ICC. Hindi lang sapat na na-commit yung any of the 4 crimes. Kailangan din na-commit siya at the time the Rome Statute has been in force in either in the territory or yung tinatawag na nationality principle. It affects the citizen, for example, of another state na state party to the Rome Statute kahit na hindi state party yung nag-sign. So, I'll just give an example of this para klaro. For example, the US is not a party to the Rome Statute. But when it committed all those atrocities in Afghanistan, the people affected, the victims, were Afghan nationals.
Yeah.
So nagkaroon ng investigation into the situation in Afghanistan, and that's how US soldiers were implicated
Indicted. Okay.
in this investigation kahit na hindi partido sa Rome Statute ang United States. So that's kind of how it works. So in general.
Yeah.
Okay.
Oo.
So
Okay.
so let's go to this point na the Philippines, as I've mentioned, became a party to the Rome Statute in 2011. However, after the preliminary examination, the reaction of the Philippine government was to withdraw from the Rome Statute, which became effective in 2019. So ang pwede lang imbestigahan ng Office of the Prosecutor at this point, kung magkaroon ng preliminary investigation, are those crimes committed during the time we were a party to the Rome Statute. So until 2019. So if you read...
So 2011 to 2019.
Technically, 2011 to 2019.
Technically,
yeah.
2011
Yun
to
yung
2019.
pwedeng tignan ng ICC. The communications relating to the war on drugs in particular allege crimes that happened in 2016, and the Office of the Prosecutor said in its statement, now we will investigate those atrocities or possible crimes against humanity until 2019. But what's interesting in that statement, is there's a reference to the acts of the Davao Death Squad, which of course,
That's-
When he was mayor.
Oo
Which I
nga.
did way
Yeah.
back.
So,
Oo.
they can extend it back.
as long as
Okay.
it is within the temporal
The 2011
jurisdiction.
limit.
Yes, yes. So
Okay,
that's the
okay.
interesting dynamic that everyone did not really expect to happen once the Office of the Prosecutor came out with that statement. So lahat nagulat, wow, pati pala yung mga possible crimes against humanity during the time that President Duterte was still a mayor, relating to the death
Exactly.
squads in Davao, could possibly be investigated upon by the Office of the Prosecutor.
Especially may mga pronouncement siya himself that he was involved.
Yes. And we know that a few years back, there were several personalities like sila Matobato that testified
Yeah.
before the Senate, and they admitted to involvement in the Davao Death Squad and tried to link it to the president. So it would be interesting
Okay.
how the Office of the Prosecutor, if ever the request is granted, would appreciate these pieces of information. So
So in a
Okay.
way, we can safely say that there is a case to be investigated by the ICC given this particular context. Okay. Oh my God. So, sige, dagdag natin dun sa discussion ni Ross kasi syempre nangyari yung pag-trigger kumbaga nga noong ICC investigation na yan dahil din dun sa nangyari earlier this month na pagpatay doon sa isang lola na point blank again binaril, 'di ba? No? So hindi ko napanood yung video eh. Kayo ba napanood niyo ba yung video?
Yeah, I
Lee,
saw
Derek,
it.
Ross?
Yep.
I saw it. Ka-level siya, I think, nung nauna this year na lola rin, na pinatay rin ng police. So parang, it's less shocking just because of that. Kasi parang nangyari na to eh, pero malala talaga siya. It's a...
Malala kasi naririnig mo umiyak yung mga
Yes,
bata
Yes.
sa background. Oh my God. Pero anyway, itong case na to, curious ako. Ang nag-commit nito ay police. And I think it was outside the pretext of the war on drugs.
Yes.
Posible ba na
Masite,
well, hanggang
masite,
2019 lang kasi.
Pero if
pero
ever, yung
masite
mga
ba to
ganyang
as an
klase
instance?
ng cases, kasi syempre, yung mga, I had the same question kasi with Vec, na parang ganyan, di ba? Kasi nung war on drugs, for example, police operatives yung supposedly nagko-conduct or nagko-commit nung extrajudicial killings. No? So, paano natin siya ma-appreciate in light of this ICC mandate?
Okay. If you carefully read through the statement that the Office of the Prosecutor released, requesting the pre-trial chamber to open an investigation. It's clearly limited to that possible state policy relating to the war on drugs. So killings, pero itong interesting killings committed by the police and vigilantes who might be involved, implicated through either the failure of the state to investigate or the state possibly supporting these vigilantes. So yung war on drugs ang pinaka-focus ng request for the investigation. Kasi yung elements of the crime of humanity, of murder, yun yung pasok. So meron kang widespread systematic attack against a civilian population. The perpetrator or perpetrators knowingly did the act as a part of the attack. So hindi lang kasi in international criminal law, hindi lang kasi sapat na ma-fulfill mo yung elements of murder, that a person was killed, that the perpetrator knowingly committed the attack. Hindi sapat yon. What we call the contextual elements of the crime against humanity. So the contextual elements include, number one, the attack is taking place within the context of the widespread or systematic policy. Pangalawa, there must be a nexus. So this is what we call the nexus requirement. A nexus between the attack and yung pagiging systematic niya at widespread.
Okay.
And pangatlo, yung knowledge of the perpetrator that what he or she did is part of that attack. So kailangan pang ma-fulfill
If we can
yun.
locate that act in a particular parang conditions of possibility.
Yes.
Parang maililink natin siya definitely doon sa people involved. Parang ganun.
So these acts of violence committed by individual policemen which are outside the war on drugs, maaari hindi napasok yan. Kasi hindi sila part nung what is possibly a widespread and systematic attack on the civilian population. So these are more of, I hate to use the word, but these are more of isolated instances of violence in the sense that they do not form part of the state policy. However, the accountability should still be equal.
Still rests on the government.
The accountability for state agents to uphold human rights.
Yes.
Diba? Yung kailangan nandun pa rin. So, in the eyes of the law, hindi mas mabigat yung crime against humanity sa individual crime of murder. Kasi parehong pagpatay pa rin yan. Meron ka pa rin kinuhang buhay and intentional pa rin yung pagpatay na ginawa. So, legally speaking, nandun pa rin yung responsibilidad to answer for the killing which the person committed. And if I may add pala, just also a part of the whole technical discussion, no? There are different modes of liability in international criminal law. So specific to the ICC, you have the mode of liability of direct commission. So for example, the person who pulls the trigger, that's direct commission. And then you also have the notion of command responsibility, which is a person ordering through different means. For
Public
example,
pronouncements.
reward, inducement, incitement. Pwede siyang maging as equally liable as the person who pulled the trigger.
I see.
And you also have
Yun na yun.
you also have other modes of liability. Although I won't go into the technical discussion, but it would be good to know na yung tinatawag na co-perpetration. So kahit hindi ikaw yung direct, pero meron kang mas meron kang involvement doon sa nangyari. Would also make you liable. And just to qualify, ang command responsibility, it's either meron kang ginawa to incite the crime or to induce the crime, or because the act is something you should have known yet failed to correct or failed to investigate, you are still liable. And yon.
Curious ako, mahaba na yung discussion, no? Pero curious lang talaga ako. Anong mangyayari kung ma-prove sa investigation na meron talagang systematic na nangyaring mga pagpatay? What would be the consequences? Makukulong ba? Aarestuhin?
Okay. Like I mentioned, the Philippines ceased to be a state party to the Rome Statute in 2019. So, wala nang duty or obligation under a treaty ang Pilipinas to cooperate with the investigation. For non-state parties such as the Philippines, the invitation to cooperate would be just that, an invitation. So kung for example, mag-issue ng warrant of arrest ang pre-trial chamber, kung dumating tayo sa punto na mag-i-issue ng warrant of arrest ang pre-trial chamber, but I have to flag that we have a long way to go before we even get to that point.
Exactly.
They can resist the warrant of arrest. For example, sabihin natin, hypothetically, tumakas sila sa isang bansa na party to the Rome Statute. The ICC, theoretically, can request the other government to pursue action against the perpetrators. That's, of course, a hypothetical situation. Di natin alam kung ano mangyayari in the next few years. Because I have to set the expectation that this will take a long time. So, hindi natin alam ang mangyayari kung makikipag-cooperate ba sila, which, of course, goes na to the point na the next government, yes, exactly, the next administration, kung ano magiging pag-approach nila dito sa usaping ito. If ever it comes to a point na mag-i-issue na ng warrant of arrest.
All right. So I think it's from now up to the point, if ever we have a new government, the only thing that can happen is international pressure to cooperate. Pero they have the jurisdiction technically because we're not party to the Rome Statute anymore to really just deny and drag this out up to such a point. Parang ganun na lang yung inaasahan natin na mangyayari.
Yeah, so importante pa rin. Actually, this point was made by Attorney Ruben Carranza in the recent forum hosted by UP Law. He said that national mechanisms are as equally important as the International Criminal Court. And this is a point that I want people to realize and appreciate. That the International Criminal Court, at the end of the day, is a court. It can decide either way. It can acquit the perpetrators or it can convict the perpetrators. So we have to, I guess, do some expectation management on our end on how this will play out. And also, hindi natin dapat pababayaan na whatever mechanisms are available domestically, in the event that the request is denied by the pre-trial chamber, we have to pursue domestic mechanisms and we have to be ready for that. Institutionally, we have to prepare ourselves to deal with the aftermath of course, this administration and what would happen in terms of pursuing accountability in the next few years.
Thank you, Ross, for that ICC 101. Talagang mukhang mahaba pa ang lalakbayin nito. But for now, let's talk about our second newsbreaker this month.
So, syempre, nandito na naman tayo sa ating monthly, na staple na ng ating monthly wrap-up, syempre yung ating COVID situationer, no? So, for this month of June, yung mga ilang events related to the COVID-19 pandemic at yung pagharap ng government natin dito, involve syempre yung continuing vaccine rollout natin. At nakita natin this month, yung iba't ibang model ng implementation ng vaccination, no? Yung isang naging discussion point rin sa media at sa social media ay yung project ni VP Leni Robredo kung saan in a way nag-incentivize ng vaccination. And then as a counterpoint, yung pronouncement ni President Duterte just on his last public show na ipapakulong yung mga hindi nagpa-vaccine, 'di ba? No? So, at syempre, yung isa pa na in relation sa paglaban sa COVID-19 ay yung pagmamandate syempre ng face shield, no? Na for the longest time nag-divide sa madaming experts at netizens na rin, no, at citizens kasi apparently isa lang tayo sa mga bansa na nagre-require ng face shield. Yung ibang bansa ay hindi naman talaga nagre-require ng face shield. So usapin rin siya ng efficacy, no, at pumupunta na rin yung discussion doon sa teka, baka naman may kumikita diyan sa face shield na yan, no?
For
So
sure.
ito yung COVID situationer natin this month. Ano yung mga take nyo dyan?
Ako, let me start, of course, with VP Lenny's Vaccine Express program. Yung sa drivers, I really appreciate it kasi isa sa mga pinaka lagi sigurong may contact with other people or you know, yung mga driver ng Grab, Food Panda, or what, siguro mga tricycle drivers na din. Ito talagang may contact talaga sa tao on the daily. So, for a government official to think of proactive programs like this na reach out to them, kasi I think may incentive, no? Kasi they cannot really miss a day of work. These are people who rely on their daily earnings, and for them to, for example, be absent from work kasi the side effects of the vaccine are being felt, parang mahirap yan para sa kanila. So yung 500 pesos na parang gas incentive, I think, from Sea Oil, it's a big thing for them. And you know, other people might say na parang maliit lang, pero for them it's actually a big thing. So I like it, but the thing is, I think there's critique na dapat dalhin ni VP Lenny yan sa mga lugar na sa probinsya daw kasi hindi naman na raw kailangan ng Metro Manila niyan kasi malakas na yung vaccine program sa Metro Manila. Ang response lang doon ay, why is it that we're expecting this from the Vice President when hindi naman talaga niya hawak yung lahat ng resources ng state for programs like this, right?
That's right. At super consistent siya sa ganitong approach kasi 'di ba before yung sa testing naman nagbibigay din siya ng groceries.
Yeah.
Kapag para lang magpa-test ka. So very incentive based yung approach ni Leni Robredo sa mga COVID responses mula last year ano. At yun nga tulad ng binanggit kanina, this is in stark contrast naman dun sa very punitive na approach ng kasalukuyang administrasyon. At effective mas effective yung ganitong klaseng proactive na measures ni Leni kasi despite her limited resources, makita na ang taas ng turnout, ang daming nagpa-vaccinate dun sa kanyang recent program na pinag-uusapan natin. At ang dami rin niyang na-test during this time. And I think yung ganong klaseng approach is something very much needed provided vaccine hesitancy. Diba? So, ay lang ko vaccine, medyo alanganin sila. Kasi kahit parents ko, halimbawa, parang hesitant sila nung una. So, alanganin sila, pero dahil meron kang binibigay na material incentive, pumunta sila, gumawa sila. Diba?
Doon sa point na nagbanta yung Pangulo na magpapa-aresto ng mga ayaw magpabakuna.
Yeah, pwede ba yan?
I think the presidential spokesperson responded to questions from the general public. Anong basis nyo for this directive that you will be arresting people? And I think Sal Panelo said in response that there's no need for an additional law that will punish those who will resist. Meron na tayo sa Constitution nung provisions on the policy on health. And siguro to rebut this point by Attorney Panelo, the Constitution is saying na everyone has the right to health. That's it. It doesn't say everyone who resists vaccines may be arrested. So walang ganong provision. And we know that for a person to be charged criminally, kailangan klaro yung batas.
Exactly.
Kailangan merong batas na nagpaparusa sa isang bagay or sa isang action para magkaroon ng basis for the arrest. Yung sinasabi ni Attorney Panelo na hindi na kailangan ng batas na yan. It again shows you the kind of thinking that's operating within this administration when it comes to social issues and the law. Which is to say it's weaponizing the law to a very punitive response and punitive direction rather than the law being empowering and the law addressing social ills. Ang nangyayari ay yung batas ginagamit, kinakasangkapan para parusahan ng mga tao. So
I think ang nangyayari nga dito, the people around Duterte are playing catch up to whatever comes out of Duterte's mouth. That kapag may sinabi si Duterte, sige, hanapan natin ng rationalization yan.
Yeah.
Only because Duterte is speaking, he's speaking without any basis, and siguro kung ano yung maisip niya, sasabihin na lang niya. And I think that's a very dangerous characteristic of a person, a head of state.
Yeah. Kahit yung sa face shield, di ba? Parang this month, ilang beses nga silang bumalibaliktad dyan. Tapos yung most recent ay binawi niya. Yung sinabi niya na hindi na natin kailangan ng face shield outside of hospitals. Tapos ang sabi niya kasi daw parang with the rise of other variants, so kailangan daw ng face shield. Parang ano klaseng justification 'yun? Meron bang nagsasabi na kayang i-prevent ng face shield ang pag-spread ng bagong variants, di ba? Wala naman eh. So itong kung saan-saan na lang din talaga hinuhugot yung mga polisiya in relation to this pandemic.
Yeah. And I think that has been the characteristic of the pandemic policy in terms of its relation to the rule of law. And the rule of law is, of course, characterized by consistency in the application of the law. Pero hindi natin nakikita yon in how this government responded for the past year or more. 'Di ba? Na every week nagbabago ang classifications ng quarantine. Every week nagkakaroon ng panibagong qualification, what is GCQ with heightened restrictions versus irregular GCQ. So wala talagang stability na sa mga polisiya, sa mga rules na dapat nating sundin. And I think the net effect of that, nagkakaroon tayo ng nare-reinforce yung distrust in institutions and nare-reinforce yung thinking ng mga tao na these laws, they mean nothing.
Yeah.
So
Pwede naman pala.
Culturally, I think, 'di ba? Culturally, I think ang naging effect nun, bakit pa tayo maniniwala dyan sa rule of law na yun? The law doesn't mean anything. So yung law abiding behavior na dinedemand ng ating mga institutions for society to function in a particular way, in a functional manner. Hindi na-erode kasi ganun yung pamahalaan mo na walang consistency sa application ng rules and laws. So
That's a very good insight. Yeah. Yun pala yung long-term na implication niya sa ating political culture.
Yeah,
So kumbaga, kung sino man yung susunod na magiging presidente,
Ang dami niyang wawalisin.
building back the trust, building back and
Or
everything.
there's also a risk of,
The
actually a big risk
institutions,
of just continuing what's been started. We still don't know, and let's hope for the best. Siguro isa namang masayang balita, no? Just this month, nag-launch yung isang Filipino myth-inspired, Filipino folklore-inspired anime sa Netflix na Trese. And a lot of people were actually sobrang na-hype dun sa marketing at promotions ng Trese. It's actually quite wonderful. And to actually see a show that shows you familiar stuff you've seen on the daily, like for example, yung sa De La Rosa Street sa Makati, yung one of the places I used to walk to going to work when I was still in the Philippines, or halimbawa yung other scenes that are, uniquely Filipino. It's wonderful for me, especially siguro for Filipinos in the diaspora, makita nila yung mga lugar na kinalakhan nila. And it was hailed as a success for representation of Filipino culture in a platform as big as Netflix. So, at marami rin siyang usapan na spark. So, what can you say? Have you seen the show? And did you like it? And
Yeah.
Hindi ko pa
what about,
tapos.
hindi pa tapos?
Hindi ko pa tapos. Pero nabasa ko kasi yung comics. Well, hindi lahat. Siguro mga 3. So, in English siya, sulat ni Budget. Tapos, ang alam kong may Filipino translation yan, si Bob Ong. So, pero hindi ako sure kung, I don't think yun yung ginamit for the script. I think they had a different, Pero
A new
the premise
script,
is actually quite good. Kasi di ba, kino-combine nila, integrate nila yung existing mythology sa existing din na, hindi lang yung folk mythology, pero kahit yung mga urban legend.
Yeah, urban legends, that's true.
So, kaya ang ganda niya.
Yeah.
Tapos, yun nga, lumabas nun sa series na meron ding social criticism na naka-integrate doon. Although a lot of people are, did not like how Alexandra Trese was built as a police agent. I mean, of course, given what's been happening with the police lately. But I think we need to be fair kasi kailan ba sinulat ang Trese, di ba? Parang years ago pa.
Parang early 2000s pa to eh.
Yeah. So,
Early 2000s.
I remember
Yeah.
kasi, ako fan ako nung pero kalaban nung Trese, yung mythology class ni Arnold Are.
Yeah.
Yun yung fan ako kasi I think yung
Are.
Trese, pero medyo sloppy yung kanyang mix ng Filipino mythology and folklore. Like, si Talagboso naglalatin. Yun talaga yung hindi ko magets. Parang, si Kitur ad Astra. Parang, bakit may Latin? Although, I would say, ano ba to? Representasyon ba ito ng
Latin?
Western colonialism? Di ba? Parang, pero Latin, bakit gano'n? Mga gandong parang feeling ko sloppy. At hindi rin ganun kaganda yung, I think, yung pacing nung mismong series. But, yeah, I think it's a win for Filipino culture at the end of the day. Kasi just to be seen in this platform is a splendid thing.
O saka in fairness, ang ganda nung nung animation, ganda ng drawing. Of course, the voice acting, especially the Filipino dub, could be improved. But overall, it's a pretty good production.
But I like it. You know what? Yun nga hindi ko mag-get sa issue ng mga tao sa Filipino dub eh. Iniisip ko, ito bang mga bata, well, I'm kinda, well, almost the same age naman. Pero as a millennial who grew up watching Tagalog
Yeah,
dub
me too.
Anime, I don't really find anything wrong with the dubbing. I mean, could be better, yes. A lot of things could be better. But, it doesn't sound bad to me. I mean, to merit yung criticism na ni-receive niya.
I don't know.
I mean, Liza pala.
I think they should have gotten a real voice actor na talaga na nagbo-boss talaga sa mga anime. Kasi hindi ko problema yung script. Okay lang siya sa akin. Okay lang sa akin kahit medyo malalim yung Filipino. Kasi maganda nga yun di ba? At least na-expose tayo sa ganung level ng Filipino, di ba? But yeah.
Ako masasabi ko lang. I've been reading the Trese books since mga 2011 siguro. So I'm a big comic book fan. And siguro yung perspective ko is for someone who has consumed more Western comic and graphic novel books and single issues. Na-appreciate ko kasi yun nga, it's very familiar. Yung konteksto nung comic book na Trese ay yung nakikita ko lang kapag lumalabas ako dyan sa kamay nila,
exactly.
di ba? So fun siya, and I think in terms of the structure of the books, and I think it translated well. Siguro nako-compare ko siya, and I think Budget said something about it na parang detective story siya, which is of course to say Batman. There's a series of Batman graphic novels, yung Gotham Central. It's an award-winning series ng Batman comics. And parang yun yung closest approximation for me in terms of Western
Hindi Detective Conan.
comics na
Japanese pala.
nung structure nung Trese comic books. I mean, of course, wala naman talaga tayo masasabing purely original work. No? Merong mga elements na derivative in Trese. Pero I enjoyed it a lot. So, na-enjoy ko yung series. Na-enjoy ko siya as a fan of the comic books since 2011. So, okay siya for me. I mean, I can see why people said na medyo siya, propaganda siya for the police. Especially with what's happening.
Yeah,
Like I saw
siya.
several tweets saying it's propaganda.
Sabi naman.
Propaganda. Yeah.
Okay, parang gets ko naman yung criticism na yun. Pero ako as a comic book fan, I enjoyed it.
I mean, all detective, we can make a case na all detective shows are, propaganda. Kasi lahat naman yan.
Sherlock nga di ba?
When you humanize the police at the end of the day, when you tell their stories, it's practically propaganda for them di ba?
Yeah, actually ako rin, no, I really, really appreciated that na nagkaroon ng Netflix adaptation yung Trese. I'm really now looking forward na sana pati yung yung mythology class and all the other graphic novels in the Philippines would have a Netflix adaptation. Kasi I think more than anything, it shows the potential of Filipino stories na meron siyang capacity to go international and go mainstream. No, na I think it shows us na it asks us what's stopping us from really going out there, 'di ba? Kasi meron ding announcement yung Netflix I think a few days ago, 'di ba? Not that they're really trying to beef up Southeast Asian content kasi they know na madaming stories from Southeast Asia. So I think yung isang success ng Trese is that it shows na yung ating local mythology, yung ating, 'di ba, yung local realities at yung ganyang scenes sa atin ay interesting na at talagang provoking enough na magkakaroon siya ng international appreciation. So I think yun yung sana mag-build on na at sana mag-spill over din siya hanggang sa mainstream na productions, na explore din natin, na itigil na natin yung mga kabit serye at mga kung ano-anong mga sampalan at barilan ng Nerf gun, 'di ba? Na parang let's think about the stories that we tell at itampok natin yung mga ganitong narratives.
So last June 24, the nation was shaken with the news of the death of former President Benigno Simeon Aquino III or si Pinoy. Namatay siya, sabi nila, in his sleep nung June 24 due to renal failure secondary to diabetes. Just 5 years after he stepped down from the presidency. So, syempre, people mourned his death kasi gulat na gulat sila. Sabi ko nga parang maling president. Anyway, and of course his death sparked or initiated a wave of nostalgia on the days of his presidency. Ang discussion umikot sa kanyang mga naging legacy. Okay. Of course, Noynoy was known as, as a stoic president. Walang masyadong emosyon. Kaya madaming hindi nakaka-appreciate sa kanya, and a lot of times he actually comes off as, unsympathetic,
uncaring.
Diba? Uncaring because of that character. Yeah. So let's weigh in on the second Aquino presidency from 2010 to 2016. Personally, Aquino was inaugurated when I was about to enter college. So, 2010. So new administration siya. So ang gusto ko sabihin ay, siya yung presidente doon sa period sa buhay ko. And I think I can speak for a lot of millennials. In the period of my political awakening, so to speak. Okay. So, and I think yung nostalgia na dinulot nung bigla niyang pagkamatay among the people roots from, hindi mo talaga ma-appreciate yung mga bagay hanggang hindi siya nawawala. That's right. So what do you think? How do you take the news?
Ako, I was shocked for one. Hindi ko in-expect na, hindi ko nga alam na may sakit siya. I mean, that's how he went so under the radar after his presidency. Na talagang nanahimik siya. And I think it's just following kung ano yung, hindi ko na parang, I think tradition sa US na kapag katapos ng presidency mo, parang, lie low ka muna and not really comment about what's happening as much as you can. Pero there were instances, I think, that he had to appear in some investigations where he had to talk about he had to talk about his presidency, and he was game for it. So, yun lang, I was surprised. And like Vic, I was forced to look back on my 2010 to 2016. During this time, I was already teaching in UPLB. And syempre, yung frame of reference ko ay, during my undergrad, we were all fighting Gloria Macapagal Arroyo. So for me, yung transition to Pinoy was actually a good thing kasi Gloria was such sobrang evil kasi yung tingin talaga namin kay Gloria nung
For
college.
good
Na talagang,
reasons.
yeah.
Tofi.
Yeah, oo. So parang ang hirap, nung panahon na ni Pinoy na prof na ako, hindi na ako ganun syempre ka-focused sa student movement, pero parang ang hirap magalit kasi for me, kasi ang daming magagandang nangyari. RH bill was passed, it became law. Yung framework agreement of the Bangsamoro, yung FAB ay na-sign. Syntax law. I mean, ang daming campaigns na pro-people na natupad naman. So,
Saka yung
looking
Green
back,
Commission, yung talagang active na pag-hunt sa mga corrupt.
yes, oo. Yung talagang nakita mo may mga nakulong na mga high profile talaga na mga senador na hindi mo aakalain na pwede palang makulong yung mga gantong people of power. Gloria herself, di ba? So,
The impeachment of the Chief Justice.
So, yeah, yun yung parang naaalala ko na parang ibang-iba sa nararanasan natin sa kasalukuyan. Yun lang naman.
Yeah, actually ako nung nabalitaan ko yung death, siguro same with everyone in this panel na talagang syempre you're forced to be reflexive in many ways kasi yun nga tama yung sinabi ni Lina nung 2010, no, Pinoy had that powerful campaign of Tuwid Dadaan and there was so much promise in his presidency. And then we of course invoked yet again the EDSA promise, no, kasi yung legacy ng parents niya and so on and so forth. No? So, but that of course does not take away all the flaws and the bad things that happened during his presidency, no? So nung namatay siya, actually, when I was observing social media, yun yung actually striking sa akin, that nagkaroon ng heated, in a way, discussion online kasi people were invoking all of the negative things that happened during his administration, which actually, had me taken aback a bit. Kaya hindi rin ako masyadong nagbigay ng comments during that time kasi hindi ko rin alam kung how I will reckon the situation. Pero kasi to me, mourning a particular death is not tantamount to forgetting. Kasi alam mo yon na parang yun sa akin kasi yung iba, I found it a little bit distasteful that they launched so many criticisms against Pinoy the person and Pinoy as the president during the day of his death. Kasi to me, a death always, it always comes with people being left behind. And to me, it's basic decency and respect to at least give these people who were pained by the loss a little breathing space to process the situation. To me, yun lang yung sa akin na nangyari sa social media and maybe even in mainstream discussions, na why are we trying to indict the man at the moment of his death? Can we at least give a few hours of, let the family grieve muna? Kasi yun nga, sa akin hindi naman ibig sabihin na we are commemorating his legacies. It doesn't mean that we are forgetting all the things that he did that might have been really disastrous to many sectors of the population. So, ako yun, na history will judge how his presidency will fare in the grand scheme of things. Pero at this point, kasi we are recording this on the day of his burial, no? So I'm giving that particular respect and salute to the man who served as president. Kasi at the end of the day, I think he did what he could. And as I mentioned din, we need to always be reminded that we are electing leaders, not saints or saviors. And I think that's what Pinoy tried to be. Although his campaign tried to really drum up the image of being the savior from the evil Arroyo presidency. At the end of the day, he was a bureaucrat, no? So he tried to do his way during his term. Uh, pero I think yung death niya should be a reminder to us na he is also just a man, no? Na with flaws and all, no? Na moving forward, sana we try to find leaders that could lead us, not saviors na silver bullet sa mga problems natin. Yun yung sa akin. Ikaw, Rose?
My political awakening was during GMA's time. So I remember in her last SONA, nag-march pa kami pabatasan. So umuulan nun. I remember specifically being so angry at what this administration did. Tapos, the following year, of course, in 2010, I actively campaigned and volunteered for the Aquino presidential bid. No? So, kaya siguro when I heard about his passing, I felt so confused what to feel. Kasi this was someone na I believed in so much na yung una kong boto that I ever cast in my whole life for the presidency, siya yung binoto ko, kinampanya ko. I ended up so disappointed. By the time in 2016, I was actively criticizing LP. Of course, Mar Rojas was the candidate na. So, I supported another candidate, Grace Poe. Kasi yung messaging din ni Grace Poe at that time was, yun nga yung very sanitized yung kanyang presentation of herself. And I think I've always been drawn to those types, no, of candidates na yung may ganong narrative. Kaya when I heard about his passing, I was so confused what to feel na this was someone I actively criticized after I felt being let down by this person. Pero yun nga, parang napag-isip-isip ko after sober reflection na compared talaga sa nangyayari ngayon. This was someone na tried his best to work within what was given to him, what he inherited from Arroyo's time. And whatever happened during his administration, in the same way that we can't valorize him as a person by himself, we can pin all the blame on him. Kasi ang dami ring nakapaligid, ang dami ring factors, considerations kung bakit naging ganun yung outcome ng kanyang pamumuno. No? So, I agree na we accord the life of the man the respect it deserves. And siguro from the point of reflecting on from a perspective na zooming out naman, I think it's also telling of how much we've lost in the past 5 years in terms of how we talk about politics, in terms of how we perceive democracy and how we appreciate democratic values. Parang ang daming nawala sa atin bilang mga Pilipino. And, di ba, parang the way we talk about people, these are people. Pero yun, the day he died, grabe, no, na agad-agad.
May mga graffiti, may mga agad
yung
effigy.
Oo, yung yung mga patutsada na I think personally, my personal sensibilities would tell me na medyo below the belt na yun. But, possibly, it could be just me and my personal sensibilities. But, for me, again, personally speaking, it speaks so much of how much we've strayed from that certain, I guess, traditional standard of civility that we have been practicing before. So, I don't know.
Actually,
diba?
gusto kong i-underline yung sinabi na yun ni Ross, no? Kasi I think our entrance to quote-unquote adult life came with that presidency na when we became more active in civil engagement, in our duty as a citizen, na hindi na tayo umaasa sa baon ng magulang. Alam mo yun, yung nandun na tayo sa point na we're trying to figure out what we do with our lives. Siya yung presidente, no? So much of how we were, how much we were talking about politics was during his time. Very formative in many ways, no? And then to come from that to the current administration, I agree with Ross na kaya talaga siguro ang laki nung difference that we perceive. Kasi ang laki rin talaga nung kaibahan
Parang
ng
ibang mundo na, no?
Pinoy administration to what we have now, no? So, and if it's any indication to how the political cycles in the Philippines would proceed after this presidency, 'di ba? Hindi ko alam kung saan ko ilulugar yung sarili ko na kung paano yung next president, parang do I want to have a president like Pinoy or what do I want? No, na parang nandun ka na sa reflection point na yun na okay, I grew up, my political awakening, quote-unquote, was with this president. My civil engagement was with this president. Tapos namatay siya in the context of a completely different, I dare say, administration. No? So parang, what's next? No? What would I aspire to have after this? No? So yun yung
Well, ako, in relation pa rin dito, gustong-gusto ko yung isang tweet ng sociologist na si Nicole Curato. Sabi niya, just because a virtuous man or an honorable man served elite democracy doesn't mean we don't have to dismantle elite democracy anymore. Kasi aminin natin, di ba? I mean, tingin ko yung pinakamalaking flaw ni Pinoy as a president ay yung kanyang class. Di ba?
The limitations of his context.
Yung kanyang, kanino ba talaga where does his loyalty really lie at the end of the day? Or did he really do much to change the status quo, which obviously wasn't working for the majority of the people, for the masses, di ba? And yung status quo na yun, ayun nga, pwede mong i-characterize bilang elite democracy, neoliberal economy. Largely, I agree dun sa mga ganung definition. And I think, kung i-appraise ko ng mabilisan yung kanyang presidency, he worked within what that kind of system would afford him. But ultimately, he preserved the status quo. But one thing I could say is that while he worked and did not change the system, he definitely didn't make it worse. I can't say the same about the present administration. Right?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Parang different animal no? Na parang nag-unleash ng
saka
iba't ibang...
hindi fair yung magiging na-i-compare yun. Alam mo, yung mga nakita kong comparison na pag sinabi mo na he wasn't a perfect president pero, di ba? Tapos i-compare dun sa Duterte might have killed a lot of people during the war on drugs, but I don't think that's a fair equivalency.
What about him?
Yeah, yun nga. He certainly didn't make our tragic status quo worse. Diba? And I think Duterte did.
So June 2021 has come and gone, and so was the first half of 2021. And it's sad to end on such a grave note, but I just want to highlight that what we are doing here is not just to look back for the sake of looking back, but also to look back with the future in mind. Kasi we definitely deserve a better future. So, again, another reminder to our listeners, please magparehistro kayo.
Buwan-buwan namin kayong kukulitin.
Para makaboto sa darating na election.
Register to vote, yeah.
So, that's our June monthly wrap-up. So, thank you very much for listening. At syempre, pasalamatan natin muli si Attorney Ross Tugade for joining us tonight. So, Ross, baka may gusto kang i-plug dyan.
Nasaan ka ba? Ano bang mga ganap sa iyong buhay?
Wala naman akong
Sa Twitter.
pina-plug ngayon. Twitter.
Sige.
Yeah, sa mga gandang mga legal takes.
Sige, my Twitter account is @Rossell. That's @ROSSELLE. If you wanna follow my thoughts, which are mostly, amateur legal takes on international law.
Alright.
So, I be tweeting from time to time, mostly on international law. So,
Alright. Thank you, Ross. At syempre sa uulitin, hindi ito ang una at huling pagkakataon na makakasama ng podcast team si Attorney Ross.
Alright, so thank you sa pag-subaybay sa aming monthly wrap-up. So if you want to stream our other episodes, please head over to Spotify, Apple Podcasts, Google Podcasts, and YouTube. So we're on YouTube as Podcast TV. You may also follow us on social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Facebook. So thank you very much and good luck sa susunod na buwan. Have a good day.